Many developers I know that use dynamic language frameworks like Ruby or Node or anything with Python, they have just thrown mocking right out the window, and they involve the database. Because as you've seen, sometimes mocking can actually cause more trouble than it's actually worth. So, if you're in that boat and you want to be able to persist some information just for your tests, something like NEDB might be really useful for you if you don't want to think about persistence until later on. NEDB is basically like SQLite for document databases. It's incredibly fast. You can use it as an in-memory database if you want, or you can have it write out to files. Installing it is as simple as any Node module, npm install NEDB. Querying with it is equally as simple, and it basically tries to use the MongoDB API as closely as possible. So if you're eventually going to graduate to something like MongoDB, NEDB is a brilliant first step, especially the in-memory only use, which you can use for tests. All right, I'll leave it to you to go on up to GitHub and have a look at NEDB. For now, I have installed it in my application here using npm install NEDB, and I've redone my index.js that's in my DB directory. There really was nothing in here before, but I have now added in a missions and an assignments database. And these are just file stores. Basically, these things are just JSON documents, and you write to them. That's it. So to create these, I just create them right at the top here, and I can use them down below in my code. As mentioned, if you've ever used MongoDB before, then using this stuff should be really familiar. Up above, I've added a method called clear stores, which drops all the data from missions and assignments using remove. And then for get mission by launch date down below, I'm using find, using the same kind of selectors that you would use with MongoDB. Really simple stuff. And that's the idea. Sometimes it can be just so much simpler to persist this stuff. And if I ever needed to transition over to MongoDB, as I mentioned before, it's easy to do. So taking a look at how our specs have changed, I'm not using Sinon at all anymore. I've commented it out completely. I'm still using Knock because I don't want to hit the Stripe API. Before everything goes off, I'm clearing all stores of data. Simple enough. And then down below, I'm just letting it all ride. It's persisting the data. My tests still run pretty fast, as you're about to see, and it's not causing me any problems. In addition, I have to say, I feel much more comfortable knowing that the data is being written. Now I can get rid of a lot of code just by letting the database go. And that's something that's really arguable. I know a lot of people react very strongly to that, especially in the .NET world. But just know that in other places, like Rails and sometimes the Node community, people just don't care that much because their tests actually run really fast. Take a look. I'll run Mocha here. I don't have a lot of tests, but it just runs as fast as it has before. One of the things that you got to keep in mind too is that since we're using Node and the modules should stay small and focused, you're not going to have hundreds of tests running at the same time. Ideally, you're going to be testing each module in its own little space. One of the nice things about using NEDB is you can just hop on over and take a look at the data that it generates. Here, I'm keeping the data inside of my DB directory, right next to my code. You can put it anywhere you like. Here you can see how it's storing the data. It's just JSON, and it's got some special system flags in there, identifying records that have been deleted, and so on. Here's the one for missions. This kind of thing is helpful if you just want to eyeball the data that's being persisted by your data store. Well, as I mentioned before, I know this is a fairly controversial topic, and I just want to state my opinion. And this is my opinion. I know that your experience is probably different. But let's take a look at a project that I just released. This is Massive.js. And for Massive.js, I had to create a whole suite of tests. Right now, I think we're up to about 160. For each test that goes off, I'm running this init routine. And this init routine executes a SQL file. That SQL file drops and reloads our entire database, including a bunch of data. Here's the SQL file right here. And we're dropping tables, we're reloading tables, we have documents going in. We have all kinds of stuff happening here. And the reason I'm pointing this out is this is a pretty involved test suite, and this is a query that needs to run before each test block is executed. Now, a lot of people would look at this and say, man, are you out of your mind? You're going to slow down your testing. Why would you ever do something like this? Well, I kind of have to with Massive because it's a data tool and I have to make sure that it actually works. Take a look at this. Look how fast this runs. Right here we have 133 passing tests and it runs in 2 seconds. Now, as I mentioned, it's a lot more than that. But we're hitting Postgres here and we're dropping the entire database, all the schema, all the files, and reloading. That's a big operation. And it's happening really, really fast. So I guess my whole point is this. Sometimes it's easier just to involve persistence from the get-go. Sometimes it's not. That part's up to you. But don't be afraid to involve your tests as you need to. Here, as you can see, things are running rather quickly. They may run quickly for you too. In this module, we played around with Stripe, got to know the billing processor and how it can help us with recurring billing with our subscriptions. We then created a billing process, a wrapper for the Stripe API, and then we stubbed it and mocked it with Sinon. And then we got into the weeds and simplified things with Knock, realized how painful that working with singletons and module caching can be in Node when it comes to testing. And finally, we took a look at simplifying our lives and just hitting the database and not worrying about mocking at all.